We're going to begin this hour, though, with a global response to the arrest of Nicolás Maduro. Venezuela's ousted president is set to be arraigned soon on a wide range of charges here in New York, along with his wife. They will be in a New York City courtroom later this afternoon after spending the weekend in jail. Think about that for a second. The attack that led to his capture is raising questions among U.S. allies and the adversaries, they are responding too. Ramy Inocencio is following this story from London. Ramy, good morning to you. What can you tell us?
Gail, yes, good morning. Well, condemnation is coming down on the United States from strategic adversaries like China, like Russia and Iran, all of them saying that this is a violation of Venezuela's sovereignty. China, which buys most of Venezuela's oil, said that it was deeply shocked and that the U.S. clearly violated international law. But there is also rising concern, Gail, that President Xi Jinping could use Trump's actions to finally invade Taiwan just off the coast. Meanwhile, from Moscow, former President Dmitry Medvedev said Trump's actions were illegal, but he portrayed it as Trump defending America's national interests since Venezuela has the world's largest proven oil reserves and as Moscow's own invasion of Ukraine's resource-rich east hits its fourth year this March. And then from Tehran, hit by mass protests against the regime since last week, Iran's supreme leader said that we will not yield to the enemy. That after Trump last week said the U.S. is, quote, locked and loaded if protesters were killed. And he stressed that again on Air Force One overnight. In response to the capture of Maduro, though, Venezuela called for an emergency UN Security Council meeting for today. Nate.
Ramy, thank you. For more on the reaction, let's bring in Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent and Face the Nation moderator, Margaret Brennan. Margaret, good morning.
Good morning to you, Nate.
All right, now there has been strong reaction on the global stage to the U.S. intervention in Venezuela. What implications could this have on our relationship with the rest of the world?
Well, Nate, we'll see that at that emergency meeting at the UN today. But for now, we already know that America's ally, France, says the U.S. violated international law. We know that the head of the United Nations himself echoed that feeling, and he called the operation a dangerous precedent. But at that emergency meeting later this morning, the Trump administration's ambassador, Mike Waltz, is going to argue that this is not regime change. They will try to say that this is just a law enforcement operation that involved help from the United States military, not a military operation itself. But the critics here are going to argue that the United States showing disregard for the consequences may effectively be interpreted as a green light to China and to Russia to conduct their own snatch and grab operations of leaders that they view as criminals.
So, Margaret, do you think there are further military operations planned, or is this mission accomplished?
It's not mission accomplished yet. Secretary Rubio told me yesterday, and he really put the emphasis here on economic pressure, not military pressure. He said cutting off the oil trade is their main leverage to get the regime to comply. But you heard President Trump himself say a second military operation could be an option. They seem to be implying here that the other indicted regime officials could face arrest, something like we already saw with Maduro himself. The idea of a military occupation, like an Iraq-style situation, seems far less likely, but it is not being explicitly ruled out.
Yeah, I saw the Secretary of State making the rounds yesterday. I watched him, of course, on your show on Face the Nation. What was your main takeaway in your conversation with him? Because he was everywhere yesterday.
He was exhausted, clearly working around the clock on this issue. I was struck by a few things. One of them, the focus now on access to oil, but also the language that the secretary used. He really pushed back on me when I was questioning him, and he said there needs to be realism. He said the Trump administration is not demanding a transition to democracy or handing over power right now to the leaders, Gail, who won that last election. The president-elect Edmundo Gonzalez is in exile. You have Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Corina Machado, who was planning to serve as his vice president. The United States is not saying that they need to take control. In fact, the president is trying to test out whether the United States can leave in place those Maduro regime officials and get them to give access to oil, get them under U.S. control, including the current president, Delcy Rodriguez, and others who are wanted by U.S. law enforcement for drug trafficking and those really deep ties to American adversaries like Russia. Take a listen.
You're asking me, do I know what decisions people are going to make? I don't. I do know this, that if they don't make the right decisions, the United States will retain multiple levers of leverage to ensure that our interests are protected.
Yeah.
And that includes the oil quarantine that's in place, among other things.
Well,
and but we are going to judge moving forward. We're going to judge everything by what they do. And we're going to see what they do.
So really, Gayle and Adriana and Nate, it is an open-ended question. And when he argues the U.S. will run Venezuela, it really means trying to control. That was my takeaway through that conversation, rather than being on the ground.
Margaret, I was glued to that interview. It was riveting. Thank you so much.